the Black Americans are this nation's true founding fathers, and that no people has a greater claim to that flag than we do.
What's up, y'all? I'm Ali.
And I'm Maya.
Together, we're on a journey to break down racial stereotypes, encourage Black positivity, and celebrate excellence.
We amplify the voices and stories that shape the Black identity, culture, and history.
This is Diary of an... And welcome back.
What's up, guys? It's your girl, Maya.
Solid. So tonight is sort of an impromptu episode.
You have to look at the people when you're talking to them. Look at them. I'm all in their nose.
I see.
You said get to the point?
Literally. So tonight is an impromptu episode because we're reading... Well, Maya wanted to read our next book because it's called 1619, the 1619 Project. You want to tell them a little bit about the book?
It's by Nikole Hannah-Jones. Well, it was created by Nikole Hannah-Jones. She was the one responsible for organizing all the contributors on this book. I learned about this book in 2022 when she came to talk at my school, at my university. And that was the first time I learned of the 1619 Project. And since then, I've wanted to read this book. I never got around to it. And I finally got it. And now we're reading it. And we have just finished the first section. We finished the preface and the first section. Sorry, we didn't finish the first section. We finished part of the first section in democracy. There's more stuff in the democracy section.
Oh, yeah?
But we finished. Yeah, we finished Nikole Hannah-Jones' part. She was the one talking in that first part. And so now we're here to talk about it. The 1619 Project is it's labeled the new origin story because it serves to fill in the gaps of African American history where I was going to say might have most likely not been taught in school.
Mm-hmm. It's very, I feel like the general knowledge is very either misleading or omitted.
Yes.
So a lot of stuff that like when they talk about Lincoln, for example, a lot of that stuff has been omitted or just spoken from a different perspective that is misleading.
Right. So Nikole Hannah-Jones talks about in the preface experiencing Black history in her classes as only talking about slavery and then immediately jumping to Martin Luther King Jr. Mm-hmm. And her problem was like, where's the rest of it? Like, we've been here all this time. Where's the rest of our history? And so throughout her lifetime, she's been learning about African American history, and she's curated this book with multiple contributors and writers made up of historians, economists, authors, who have all studied slavery to come up with this project. So we have gotten through... You said, what's the point of this video? I don't know. We're just here.
It's late night.
It's late night and we're talking.
We're chatting. You said I haven't spoken? Shut your mouth.
So we started... Do you want to talk about the preface?
No, so this is the preface. I listen to audiobooks. Maya likes the physical copies. I thought I listened to the preface. I did not. Because when we were listening, when she was giving me her summary of how she felt about the book, she spoke on the preface, and I didn't remember what she was talking about. So I started at chapter 1. Maya read the preface, so you can start the preface, and I'll go back and listen to it.
Okay, the preface is called Origins, and it is written by Nikole Hannah-Jones. She pretty much recounts her journey to creating this project. She starts off with herself in high school, reminiscing about the time that she had like a revelation where she realized there's so much more to African American history than the American curriculum leads on. And she says she expresses her frustrations with the big gap between slavery and Martin Luther King Jr. And she says that she took a course in high school. It was an African American history course. It was called the African American Experience, and that was when she said that this was her only Black male teacher that she's had in public school, and that this class was so enlightening for her because she learned so much that she would not have learned that early had she not taken that course. And she expressed that the emotions she felt when she read of this history both angered her and empowered her. And I felt really in line with that because I didn't start taking African American history classes until I was in college in the year 2020. The summer of 2020, I think I started my African American history minor. And that was really enlightening for me because I had not previously learned about African American history in public school. And I felt that same emotion of anger. Like, why did it take me so long to be able to learn about my history, to be exposed to it?
Right.
And it's also like I didn't even know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't learn my history myself because I didn't know that I had history about us to learn. So I really sympathize with that feeling. And she goes on to say that the 1619 project came about when she worked for the New York Times, and she had brought it up as an article idea. And so she gathered all these people to help contribute to the issue. And when it released, it sold out that week. And from then, after it was published, educators across the nation began incorporating the 1619 project into their curriculum. And in Chicago, which was one of the first districts to incorporate the 1619 project, there was a student, Artira Griggs, who said that this project helped her realize, start quote, "We were the founding fathers. We put so much into the U.S. and we made the foundation," end quote. And that was so moving to me. It's true. Like, the entirety of the American nation was built by Black people through our enforced labor, or forced labor, and non-consensual labor. That the founding fathers wouldn't have had the resources, the ability, the financial standing to lead a revolution had it not been for the institution of slavery and Black people in America. We built so much of this nation that we deserve the title as the founding fathers. She goes on to say that the history of Black people before the American Revolution has been conveniently left out of the founding mythology of the United States of America. You said, what else do I have to say? She says that a lot of this revolves around power, to keep the power structure in America, to keep the white Americans at the top of the power structure. We didn't prepare anything for this video. I want you to know that we literally just turned on the camera and started talking. So I'm sorry if my ideas are scattered. Our nation obscures and diminishes this history, meaning the history of slavery and enslavement, because it shames us as a country. America is ashamed of their history, and that's why she works so hard to hide it. When it's so integral in American history, it cannot be ignored. It cannot be erased. It has to be addressed. She says that if we are truly a great nation, then our truth cannot destroy us. So why are we so scared of the truth? And she said another bar in the preface. She said that relating to the African American history course that she took in high school that was optional. It wasn't a mandatory course. She said, "Our history is still optional. It remains an elective." And that just goes to show that white Americans have the privilege of being uneducated about Black history. Black Americans do not have the privilege of being uneducated about white American history. It's mandatory that we learn that history. We learn it every single year about the American Revolution, about the founding fathers, about how they built this great nation. And you could probably walk up to a random white person on the street and ask them a question about Black history, and they have the privilege of saying, "Oh, I'm not well versed in Black history," because they were not required to learn it.
So 2 things. I know there's a lot of things highlighted in there. Number 1, I love it.
Oh, I love it.
Cool. Number 2 is I forget. I think my mom actually said this, but she got from somewhere that history is written by the victors. So I think that privilege, or not even, I think the fact that it's mandatory for us to learn about white history as opposed to Black history goes to show that how true that statement is.
Yeah. Go ahead, are you done?
No, I was just gonna say, like, even in school, like, I feel like we're taught more about. I had a genocide. I did not have a genocide. I had a genocide studies course in high school, and granted, my teacher was also Jewish. So shout out to her. She's cool. But the curriculum in the genocide studies course was so heavily focused on the Holocaust as opposed to anything else. We talked about the Holocaust for maybe half of the time in the semester.
And this was a general genocide course?
Yes, it was a general genocide course.
Okay.
But that being said, we talked about the Holocaust and then the Rwanda genocide. Those are the only 2 things I remember.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the fact that slavery isn't even mentioned in that course is absolutely astounding. Right. Because of the atrocities that were committed during slavery. Not saying that to put one against the other, obviously all of it's bad.
Right.
But to not even have it brought up in conversation is absolutely insane. So
that just goes to show how much the suffering of Black people have been mitigated in this country and forgotten. Yeah. Was that you again?
No, but I think, okay, so for everybody who doesn't know, Maya has a cat named Dawson. So we keep looking around. He's a very quiet cat.
Usually cats are. No, I'm sorry. There are some talkative cats.
That's valid.
The cats are genuine.
My dog has a little bell on her, so we know when she's coming around.
Oh, no. Dawson just sneaks around.
You might hear a whisper or something.
That's insane. I don't even remember what I was saying, but it's just, I can't even think of the word I'm trying to think of. America is so desensitized to not even desensitized, because most Americans don't know the full extent of what happened during enslavement. All that to say, I forgot what I was saying. Literally, it's 11 o'clock. I have the attention span of a fly right now.
We're going off. What do you got? 2 espresso shots? And a bang energy drink.
Yeah. So the book is ordered chronologically. It touches on all is a stretch. It touches on institutions that have benefited from slavery. And the first institution it talks about is democracy, which starts in 1619, when the first ship carrying enslaved people came to, was it Virginia? And that, I'm not even at the right part. What a joke.
30 people, I believe.
It was 20 to 30 enslaved people, and they came in on a ship called the White Lion. And that is where the book starts. So there's different works in here. There's like, from so far that I've seen, there's little passages, there's poems, there's pictures, and then there's longer passages. So the book starts off with a picture of Nikole Hannah-Jones's father, Milton Hannah, and then the next long passage is written by Nikole Hannah-Jones. And she starts off talking about her father, who always flew the American flag. And this was a really, I had a really emotional reaction to this part of the book. She talks about how her father, who started in the military, would always wave the American flag. He always had a spare if the one that was already flying got tattered, even in the slightest, he would replace it. And she goes to say that she doesn't understand why her father is flying this flag when this country has mistreated us for so long. She saying that, this country isn't ours, so not that it isn't ours, but the country does not want us. So why are you proudly waving this flag for this country that does not like you? And she goes on to say that after her education and she's had time to learn about African American history, I'm going to read this short passage from the book. She says, start quote, "Like most young people, I thought I understood so much when in fact I understood so little. My father knew exactly what he was doing when he raised that flag. He knew that our people's contributions to building the richest and most powerful nation in the world were, wow, I don't know this word, indelible? That the United States simply would not exist without us," end quote. And what she's pretty much saying is that of the Americans that wave the American flag, Black Americans have not just an obligation, but can't think of the word.
I can't help you.
I'm looking at you for help.
I know. It's terrible.
I think that not only are we obligated to wave the American flag, but we're also deserving of waving the American flag. Because this country is just as much, if not more, our country than white Americans. That's a
valid statement.
It is a valid statement. Because they did not do the work to get to this point. We did so much work unrecognized, non-consensually in the financial construct of the early Americas, the progression of the Reconstruction era.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy.
The Reconstruction era. The Civil Rights Movement was the first rights movement in America.
Yeah, and paved the way for everything else.
It paved the way for all the other movements in America.
And suffrage.
That's all you got?
I know. That was rough. That was real rough. Women's suffrage. I didn't want to say gay suffrage. But
gay rights. Immigrant rights. Disability rights. It all started with...
She said that's why.
I was asking a genuine question.
That's terrible.
That's the thing. Wow, okay, so we got off track. Well, not really, but I just went really far. So we just covered this. Here, she says exactly what I was trying to say. She says, "The Black Americans are this nation's true founding fathers, and that no people has a greater claim to that flag than we do."
Okay. So, I'm not going to read the direct passages. You want to go?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to read the direct passages. But in summary, everybody, at least from what I'll say for myself, no, it's not inaccurate. From my understanding of American history, to keep it very oversimplified, the North is good, the South is bad. That's it. Up north, black people were free. Down south, they were slaves. That's pretty much a very overgeneralization of at least what I was taught. That being said, this states that number one, all 13 colonies had slaves, so it wasn't just a problem in the South, or it wasn't just an institution in the South. It was throughout the American colonies. Period. During the American Revolution, in order to understand Lincoln's standpoint, you have to understand the situation as a whole.
Which was I'm assuming you're talking about the Dunmore Proclamation?
I believe so.
Where, I don't know his name, let me find it. His full name, at least. The proclamation said, okay, I can't find the actual quote, but the proclamation said that any enslaved person that came over to fight in the British Army would be emancipated. That's what the Dunmore Proclamation said. And that is what that war tactic that Dunmore used, because Dunmore was not an abolitionist. He did not necessarily believe in the abolishment of slavery, but they needed the extra troops, which is why they promised that emancipation in return for soldiers, essentially. And that mirrors the reasoning behind the Emancipation Proclamation that Lincoln, did he pass it or something?
Yeah.
I don't know if he also wrote it.
I think he wrote it.
Wrote it and passed it. Does that help set you up?
Yes.
So the part you're looking for happened a year after the Civil War had already started. The Emancipation Proclamation did not come into conversation until a year after the Civil War had already started.
Mm-hmm. And the purpose of it was not necessarily to free the slaves, which is how I feel it's taught, but it was actually a war tactic to get more troops into the army to actually win the war.
To fight with the Union against the Confederacy.
Right.
And now you can talk about the free black men that we talked to.
Oh, okay. Alright, so this was after, right? After the war?
No, this is still during the war.
Oh, wow. That's even sicker.
This is when the Emancipation... I can't say that word for life me. The Emancipation Proclamation was pretty much being drafted. He had brought the free black men in to talk about what black people would do after they were emancipated.
Sure. Okay. That being said, the purpose in the Emancipation
Told you.
That was rough. The Emancipation Proclamation was not to actually simply free the slaves. It was simply a war tactic in order to bring more troops to the losing Union over and to help the Union beat the Confederacy. Right? That being said, while the Emancipation Proclamation was being drafted, Lincoln had a meeting with a few freed black men, educated black men.
They were highly esteemed black
men. I was going to make a joke. I'm not going to make a joke. But he had a meeting with these black men, and essentially in that meeting, it was discussed on what would happen after blacks were freed, right? In the meeting, Lincoln proposed that after freedom, after you guys are emancipated, you guys should leave the country. Go somewhere else. We don't want you here.
He said, y'all can be free, but you cannot be free here.
All right, you got what's the line? You got to leave.
You don't got to go home, but you can't stay here.
Fair enough. That's basically what he said, so that's where we get it from.
And that was called colonization, the act of freed black people leaving America after they were free.
And you know what's funny? Actually, I didn't make this connection per se. Well, first of all, to finish that statement, obviously we didn't do that because we're here. And they were also saying how wrong it is for you to even suggest me to leave after I damn near built the entire infrastructure of the country, right? But that being said, I was listening to Farrakhan a few weeks ago, maybe, like a old YouTube video, and he was basically saying how the civil injustices, what's a way that we can sort of like bridge the gap, or like what's it called, sort of get reparations for all the wrongdoings. And he was essentially saying to, I'm pretty sure this is actually an episode that we're gonna have anyway, but he was saying to have our own country essentially, or our own entity within the U.S. For Black Americans. Obviously, we've tried that, and, really hasn't worked out. So, yeah, I just thought that was crazy for Lincoln to suggest that after everything we did to build the country, we should leave. I think that's crazy.
So the part after the Emancipation Proclamation talks about obviously the emancipation of the enslaved people and the Reconstruction era after slavery. It talks about the ratifying of was it the 13th? 13th is the Emancipation Proclamation, right?
13th is no slavery. You said, how do I know that? Do I have a right? That game is so fun. If you guys don't know Do I Have a Right, what's the website called? iCivics.
Oh.
I knew you didn't know I was talking about.
Oh, okay, my fault.
The website is called iCivics. Y'all need to go play that game.
So the 13th Amendment was outlawing slavery. Then, after that, Congress ratified the 14th Amendment, ensuring citizenship to Black Americans and all people born in the United States. Nikole Hannah-Jones goes on to say, today, thanks to this amendment, every child born here and all their progeny thereafter gains automatic citizenship. And then, in 1870, the Congress passed the 15th Amendment, which was the right to vote, regardless of race. Okay, so then Reconstruction happens. And then after the Reconstruction period, there was a period between the 1880s and the early 20th century, which became known as the Second Slavery or the Great Nadir. And democracy would not return to the South for nearly a century. And this period, the Great Nadir, was so vile and so grotesque that Nazi Germany would later take inspiration from it for its own racist policies.
That's crazy.
Which also goes back to what you said about how American slavery was not brought up in your genocide course.
Yeah. And I also, maybe I don't have enough background context for this, but to do the atrocities here, have a foreign country take inspiration from that, and then to go over to that foreign country and stop that.
Oh, that's outrageous.
That's outlandish. That's absolutely outlandish. Because they got it from you. How you not going to fix it here first? What's going on?
It's actually bizarre,
I have to snooze.
Okay, do it in the mic. Don't do it in the mic.
I know.
Do it on mic.
Who's Mike?
I don't know who Mike is. No,
That's insane.
Okay.
He's tough. I can never get his counter down. He's tough. So he doesn't have a counter?
His recovery is so
horrible.
Funny. Because if you miss, you're dead.
You can't stop it. You can't stop it. It's too late. Ah! He's gone. Alright. Back to depression.
Back to enlightenment.
Fair enough. So the passage says, or at least what we highlighted, it says many white Americans saw black men in uniforms of America's armed forces, armed services, not as patriotic, but as exhibiting a dangerous pride. Hundreds of black veterans were beaten, shot, maimed, and lynched. We like to call those who lived during World War II the greatest generation, but that allows us to ignore the fact that many of this generation fought for democracy overseas while brutally suppressing democracy for millions of American citizens. During the height of racial terror in this country, black Americans were not merely killed in mob attacks and lynchings, but castrated, burned alive, and dismembered, with their body parts displayed in storefronts and strewn across lawns of black communities. This violence was meant to terrify and control black people, but perhaps, just as importantly, it served as a psychological balm for white supremacy. You would not treat human beings this way. That is absolutely insane. I knew about the lynchings and the mob attacks. I knew about the castration. Being burned alive, dismembered. First of all, the other things were already horrible to start off with. But imagine seeing a family member, a friend, or anybody, just a body period, a person period, dismembered in my fucking front lawn. What the hell?
White people would keep body parts of black people on display in their houses.
Yep. I knew that. I didn't know it was in the storefronts on public property. It's like what they do with the fucking deer. That's so, I hate that so much. It's the same thing.
They probably do that because they can't do it to us. Okay, now we get into the part that you guys brought up in the beginning about seasoning.
Oh, that was tough.
Yes.
That's tough.
So, Nikole Hannah-Jones, after this, after what Arlie had just spoken about, she goes on to talk about the process of seasoning, in which people are stolen from Western and Central Africa, and were forced, often through torture, to stop speaking their native tongues and practicing their native religions, which I have a lot to unpack about the native religions part.
Okay.
And that process is called seasoning.
Which is ironic. You said how? You shut up.
And so the process of seasoning, instead of erasing identity, served as an opposite purpose in the void. Did I say that right? Mm-hmm. And so the process of seasoning, instead of erasing identity, served an opposite purpose. In the void, we force a new culture, all our own. So the process of seasoning was the white Americans' attempt to erase our identity, our culture, our pride, and our sense of self and self-expression. And from that, we created a new one. We created a new culture. We created new language. We created new means of self-expression that has flourished into the African American culture of today. She goes on to say, today's avant-garde nature of black hairstyles and fashion displays a vibrant reflection of enslaved people's determination to feel fully human through self-expression.
That was crazy.
She also goes on to say that mainstream society will take our style, our slang, they will appropriate our culture, and they will still hate us. She quotes Langston Hughes, who wrote in 1926, start quote, "They'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed I too am America," end quote. And she put a banger right here. She said, she was pretty much talking about I know, but I want to preface that she was talking about the disparities in the black community today. She does essentially say that this behavior is predictable based off of how the country has built this racial caste system. that these disparities in the Black community are birthed out of trauma, out of generational trauma that we are still working to unlearn and heal from, because, start quote, Black people were enslaved here longer than we have been free, end quote. She says that we have not been legally free. She doesn't put a date here, but she says we've been legally free for 50 years while we have suffered under slavery for 250.
There's something I wanted to bring up. I think I brought this up to you earlier too. With the what did you say? The trauma response. I think it was a TikTok video probably that I saw. But it was probably it was talking about how Black people still have unlearned trauma responses. So, for example, like steak or just meats, period. When enslaved people were fed food, typically we would get the remainders of whatever was left over. So, like the pig intestines, I forget what it's called, chitlins, I think. Like pig feet, stuff like that, like the throwaway meat, right? So when we were fed that stuff, we would have to cook the food thoroughly through and like well done, essentially, to try to kill off as much bacteria. Was this? I spoke about this with you already.
I think you started to.
Okay, I probably just didn't finish. Yeah. So how we would take those, because we were eating the horrible parts of meat, essentially the throwaways. We would cook food to be well done to kill off as much bacteria as possible. And that is still with us today. Like, you don't see Black people ordering a rare steak.
I don't think I've ever seen a Black person order a rare steak.
Right.
Medium rare.
That's best. Yeah. I had to learn to like medium rare. It's good, though.
It is good.
Yeah. But I started off with well done. That, same thing with the seasoning. So, like, that's also why I found that wording to be funny. Ironic? Yeah, ironic, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, if anything, we over-season to try to kill off the bad taste of whatever it was prior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But even that in itself is still a trauma response, because realistically, yes, food is still crazy. Our food tastes amazing. But we probably don't need to add as much seasoning as we do.
Nikole Hannah-Jones makes a good point. We have not had the time to heal from that generational trauma. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so... We're doing a great job. But that's why it's so prevalent. That's why we have so many disparities in the Black community, because we haven't healed, and we're not getting help with healing either.
Nice.
She ends her passage by saying, we were told once by virtue of our bondage that we could never be American, but it is by virtue of our bondage that we became the most American of all. And that was the first section of the democracy section of 1619. Alright guys, thanks for watching. We are trying to post every Sunday after church. So after 3 o'clock on Sundays. So after you go to church, you can come hang out with us. Thank you for watching this episode. It was a bit of a heavy one. Thanks for getting through it with us. We're going to continue reading this book. I've really been enjoying it so far. It's been very enlightening. Very validating. Please like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Help support us. You know that we do. Help support the Black people. And help support us heal through generational trauma. Also follow us on Instagram at The Sublime Few. And on Threads at The Sublime Few. Okay. Thank you. Bye, good night, and stay Black. Y'all don't really have a choice.
That's it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Diary of an... We hope our conversation sparks some thought, reflection, and inspiration. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here though. Keep amplifying Black voices in our communities.
Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the channel so you know when we post. Follow us on Instagram at The Sublime Few for more informative content. And leave a review wherever you listen to our podcast.
Until next time, stay curious, stay learning, and stay unapologetically Black.